last few minutes, we've just confirmed through our White House team that an hour from now, the president will be meeting with the FBI director, the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, as well as DNI Coates. He oversees the 16 intelligence agencies. It's described to us as a regularly scheduled meeting, but the source said they do anticipate that this records request, which relates to an intelligence source and the information that was gathered from that, will likely come up. In the meantime, as you mentioned, the Justice Department has really wasted almost no time announcing the expansion of this internal investigation into government surveillance during the presidential election. The new line of inquiry will consider whether there was any impropriety or political motivation and how the FBI obtained surveillance warrants or used informants to collect intelligence. In a statement released late on Sunday, the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein said if anyone did infiltrate or surveil participants in a presidential campaign for inappropriate purposes, we need to know about it and take appropriate action. As part of its ongoing reporting, Fox News has learned the Republican chairman of the House Intelligence and Oversight Committees, Devin Nunes and Trey Gowdy, want a discrete set of records, about 200, related to the intelligence source and whether information from that source was used in the Russia investigation or for obtaining surveillance warrants.
Well, I can tell you that nobody was ever interested in an informant. We asked for specific documents that we still have not received from the Department of Justice. So they continue to leak out things about this informant, and we don't know if there's one informant or more informants because there's so much out there now. It's really getting tough to follow, and all we're asking for is give us the documentation that you used to start this investigation.
Republican congressional investigators also question whether Rosenstein may have a conflict because he signed off on at least one of the surveillance warrants during the campaign, the renewals. Dana.
Chairman Nunes is certainly correct. It is hard to follow, and they just keep throwing more and more information out there. Catherine, I understand there's strong reaction from Democrats.
There is. Senior Senate Democrat Dianne Feinstein, who sits on the Intelligence and Judiciary Committees, writing in a tweet the president's statement indicating that he will order the Justice Department to investigate the FBI could not be more disturbing, and reiterates his deep contempt for the rule of law. Also, the senior Democrat on the powerful Senate Intelligence Committee said the spy claims have no foundation.
I have no information that would indicate that the president's tweets or theory of the case is at all based in truth.
Warner's statements, of course, have weight because as the ranking Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, he would have access to that type of information, Dana.
All right, Catherine, thank you for that report.
Is an FBI agent allowed to have a political opinion?
Yes.
Is an FBI agent allowed to communicate that political opinion to their wife or even their mistress?
Yes.
So nothing in a text simply communicating a political opinion would be cause for firing or any other action under the ordinary rules of the FBI or any federal person, correct?
I think each question would have to be based on its own circumstances. Certainly, I can imagine situations, as you're describing, where it wouldn't be, and I can imagine situations where it might be.
Well, so that brings us to a situation now in which an individual is key to the question of whether or not there should be a full de novo review of the FBI's actions as to Hillary Clinton and the decision not to prosecute her, since he was actively involved in that. So my question to you is, since it's clear that whatever Peter Strzok did was sufficient to have him relieved, something that in the ordinary course of simply communicating a political opinion would not cause that and would be inappropriate to relieve somebody simply for having a political opinion, will you make available to this committee, upon the chairman's obvious request, the ability to see any or all of those 10,000 texts sufficient to understand why this individual was dismissed and how it might be relevant to the question of the objectivity of Director Comey's investigation and conclusions?
Well, there's a couple parts to your question, if I might. First, I want to be clear that the individual in question has not been dismissed.
He's not been dismissed, but he's been relieved from the duties he had, and he's now in HR,
He was reassigned away from the special counsel investigation, which is different than disciplinary action. Second, as to the question of access to the text messages, We'd be happy to try to work with the committee on that. I want to be sensitive to the fact that there is an active, very active, outside independent investigation by the Inspector General, and the last thing I want to do, and I think the last thing this committee would want to do, would somehow compromise or interfere with that. So we'll have to go through a process to assess how we can be sensitive to those operational considerations, while at the same time, as we should be responsive to Congress and this committee and its oversight responsibility.
Would the gentleman yield on that?
Of course I'd yield to Chairman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. We have been in communication with the Inspector General. We very much respect the investigation that is taking place there. And we have asked the Department of Justice, and through them, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, for all of the 1.2 million documents that have been provided to the Inspector General, minus those that relate to any particular ongoing grand jury investigation. Now, I have received back from the Assistant Attorney General, Mr. Boyd, a letter indicating that they will make a fulsome response to that request. So I would like, in following up with Mr. Ice's question, to hear you tell us that you will also provide us with that honoring of that fulsome request, because most of those documents that the department has committed to provide are coming from the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Certainly, I don't mean to suggest that we wouldn't be fully responsive and cooperative with the committee. I'm simply saying that we would work with the Justice Department in making sure that we have considered all the appropriate factors that we need to make sure that we're not doing something on the, in terms of unintended consequences with ongoing investigations, but we have no desire to frustrate the very legitimate oversight requests of this committee.
Would the chairman yield for a moment?
Yes, I yield to the gentleman.
Thank you. I just want to ask the director if can this kind or does this kind of document request of the Inspector General on an ongoing investigation, could it interfere with that investigation? Is it proper to respond fulsomely? I mean, what are the limitations here?
Well, I think a lot of that requires, as the chairman referenced, us to make sure that we are touching base with the Inspector General, since it's his investigation and not ours. If the Inspector General is comfortable with the information being provided and that it's not going to interfere with or impede his investigation, then that's one very, very significant consideration that can be put to the side. So I can commit that our staff will work with the Justice Department staff and your staff to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to be responsive, while at the same time making sure that we're not in some way jeopardizing or compromising an ongoing investigation or revealing something about a grand jury matter or anything like that.
We asked for it minus grand jury material. Obviously, it takes some time to do that. Mr. Boyd committed to a date of January 15, and he's going to require your cooperation. So we want to have your assurance that that cooperation in meeting that date will be forthcoming. We intend to follow up with further letters on clarifying this, but it's very important that we have this information very quickly. The Inspector General is completely cooperative with us in his investigation, but they're not his documents. They are the FBI and the Department of Justice documents, so the request is not directed to him, it's directed to the department, and we need to have full response.
We intend to be fully cooperative with both this committee and the Inspector General.
Director, was Agent Peter Strzok the former deputy head of counterintelligence at the FBI?
I don't remember his exact title, but I believe that's correct.
And he's the same Peter Strzok who was a key player in the Clinton investigation, the same Peter Strzok who interviewed Cheryl Mills, Huma Abedin, participated in the Clinton, Secretary Clinton's interview. And he's also the same Peter Strzok who now we know changed Director Comey's exoneration letter, changed the term gross negligence, which is a crime, to extreme carelessness. Is that the same guy?
Well, Congressman, I don't know every step that the individual you mentioned was involved in, but certainly I know that he was heavily involved in the Clinton email investigation.
Thank you. And is this the same Peter Strzok who helped, was a key player in the Russian investigation, and the same Peter Strzok who was put on Mueller's team, Special Counsel Bob Mueller's team?
I certainly know that he was working on the special counsel's investigation. Whether or not he would be characterized as a key player on that investigation, that's really not for me to say.
And the same Peter Strzok that we learned this past weekend was removed from the special counsel team because he exchanged text messages with a colleague at the FBI that displayed a pro-Clinton bias. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Talk about the same guy. Okay.
Yes.
Well, here's what I'm not getting. Peter Strzok is selected to be on Mueller's team after all this history, put on Mueller's team, and then he's removed for some pro-Clinton text messages. I mean, there are all kinds of people on Mueller's team who are pro-Clinton. There's been all kinds of stories. PolitiFact reported 96% of the top lawyers' contributions went to Clinton or Obama. But Peter Strzok, the guy who ran the Clinton investigation, interviewed Mills, Abedin, interviewed Secretary Clinton, changed gross negligence a crime to the term extreme carelessness, who ran the Russian investigation, who interviewed Mike Flynn, gets put on Mueller's team, and then he gets kicked off for a text message that's anti-Trump. If you kicked everybody off Mueller's team who was anti-Trump, I don't think there'd be anybody left. So there's got to be something more here. It can't just be some text messages that show a pro-Clinton, anti-Trump bias. There's got to be something more. And I'm trying to figure out what it is. But my hunch is it has something to do with the dossier. Director, did Peter Strzok help produce and present the application to the FISA court to secure a warrant to spy on Americans associated with the Trump campaign?
Congressman, I'm not prepared to discuss anything about a FISA process in this setting.
We're not talking about what happened in the court. We're talking about what the FBI took to the court, the application. Did Peter Strzok, was he involved in taking that to the court?
I'm not going to discuss in this setting anything to do with the FISA court applications.
Well, let's remember a couple things, Director. And I know you know this. We've all been made aware of this in the last few weeks. Let's remember a couple things about the dossier. The Democrat National Committee in the Clinton campaign, which we now know were one and the same, paid the law firm, who paid Fusion GPS, who paid Christopher Steele, who then paid Russians to put together a report that we call a dossier full of all kinds of fake news, National Enquirer garbage. And it's been reported that this dossier was all dressed up by the FBI, taken to the FISA court, and presented as a legitimate intelligence document, that it became the basis for granting a warrant to spy on Americans. And I'm wondering if that actually took place. It sure looks like it did. And the easiest way to clear it up is for you guys to tell us what was in that application and who took it there.
Congressman, our staffs have been having extensive interaction with both intelligence committees on our interaction with the FISA court, and I think that's the appropriate setting for those questions.
Here's what I think, Director Wray. I think Peter Strzok, head of counterintelligence at the FBI, Peter Strzok, the guy who ran the Clinton investigation, did all the interviews, Peter Strzok, the guy who was running the Russian investigation at the FBI, Peter Strzok, Mr. Super Agent at the FBI, I think he's the guy who took the application to the FISA court. And if that happened, I mean, think if this happened, if you had the FBI working with a campaign, the Democrats' campaign, taking opposition research, dressing it all up and turning it into an intelligence document and taking it to the FISA court so they could spy on the other campaign, if that happened, that is as wrong as it gets. And you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. You could clear it all up. You could clear it all up for all of us here, all the Congress who wants to know, and frankly, all of America who wants to know. You could clear it all up by release. We sent you a letter 2 days ago. Just release the application. Tell us what was in it. Tell us if I'm wrong. But I don't think I am. I think that's exactly what happened. And if it did, it is as wrong as it can be. And people who did that need to be held accountable.
Congressman, we will not hesitate to hold people accountable after there has been an appropriate investigation, independent and objective, by the Inspector General into the handling of the prior matter. And based on that, I will look at all available remedies, depending on what the facts are when they are found. As to the access to the dossier, that's something that is a subject of ongoing discussion between my staff and the various intelligence committees.
There's nothing prohibiting you, Director. Is there anything prohibiting you from showing this committee what was presented to the FISA court, the application you all put together at the FBI that was presented to the FISA court. Is there anything preventing you from showing us that?
The time the gentleman has expired. The director can respond.
I do not believe that I can legally and appropriately share a FISA court submission with this committee.
I'm talking about what the FBI put together, not what the court had, what you took there, what was the process put together, what you presented, what you took to the court.
When I sign FISA applications, which I have to do almost every day of the week, they are all covered with a classified information cover. So that's part of why we would not be discussing it here.
Is it likely that Peter Strzok played a part in the application presented to the FISA court?
The gentleman's time has expired. However, I do want to follow up on your last response to the gentleman. This committee, the House Judiciary Committee, has primary jurisdiction over the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court.
Yeah.
So any request for documents coming to any part of the Congress should include the House Judiciary Committee, and if it is classified in any way, shape, or form, it can be provided to us in a classified setting. But that is information that we are very much interested in,
Mr. Chairman,
very much want to receive.
Just a question to the chairman. Yeah, I don't think there's anything prohibiting the FBI from giving us what they used to put together what was taken to the FISA court. That's what we're asking for, and there is nothing prohibiting him from doing that.
I don't think there is either. The time of the gentleman has expired, however. Do you care to respond to that, Director Wray?
No, I think I've covered it.